right, so get this. We're diving deep today into Wu Wei.
Wu Wei.
Yeah, this ancient Chinese idea of effortless action.
Oh.
And the thing is, it connects to that feeling of being in the zone we've all felt. We've got psychology articles, ancient philosophy texts, even some stuff on modern sports and physics for this one.
Wow.
It's wild how it all comes together. You ready to have your mind blown?
I think so. Let's do it.
Okay, so flow, this feeling of being totally absorbed in what you're doing, it isn't just some new agey concept.
No, not at all.
Psychologists have been studying it for decades, right?
Yeah, actually, Malati Csikszentmihalyi, one of the pioneers in this field, he actually mapped out how flow happens.
Okay, so break it down for me. I'm picturing some complex equation here.
It's more of a sweet spot. Imagine a graph. Okay, one axis is your skill level, the other is the challenge level.
Okay.
Too much challenge for your skill, you get anxiety. Too little challenge, and you're bored out of your mind.
All right.
Flow is that perfect balance where you're fully engaged, using your skills to meet a challenge that's just right.
So it's like that feeling when I'm coding and I lose track of time, or like when you're playing music and you're just completely in the groove.
Exactly. And it turns out there's a whole spectrum of flow.
Oh, really?
You've got regular flow, which many of us experience, from time to time.
Yeah.
But then there's this more elusive state called superflow. Think of it like flow on steroids.
Superflow. Okay, now you're speaking my language. This is where it gets really interesting.
Right.
Our sources, they actually compare this to superfluidity in physics.
Yeah, it sounds crazy, but stick with me for a second.
Okay.
Superfluidity is when you have certain liquids that are cooled to almost absolute zero and they start flowing without any friction at all.
Whoa.
They can even defy gravity and climb up the walls of a container.
Okay, I'm already seeing the connection here. Are we saying our minds can reach a state of superfluidity where thoughts and actions just flow effortlessly, like we're encountering zero resistance?
It's all about reducing friction, both mental and physical. That's the key to unlocking these heightened states of performance, whether it's superflow in our minds or superfluidity in a lab.
So I've definitely experienced this as an athlete. There have been times when I'm competing and it's like my ego just vanishes. I lose all sense of time and I'm just completely absorbed in the moment. It feels effortless, but I'm performing at a level I wouldn't think possible otherwise.
Yeah, athletes often describe this as being in the zone, where everything just clicks, It's that feeling of complete immersion where conscious thought takes a backseat and actions become almost instinctual.
Okay, so we've got flow, we've got superflow, but where does this Wu Wei concept fit in?
Well, Wu Wei is an ancient Chinese term that's often translated as effortless action or non-doing, but don't let that fool you. It's not about being passive or lazy.
Okay.
It's more about cultivating a state of mind where you act in harmony with the natural flow of things, without forcing or striving.
So are we talking about surrendering to the flow of life like a surfer riding a wave? Is that the essence of Wu Wei?
That's a great analogy. It's about aligning yourself with the natural order of the universe. It's a core principle in Taoism, which emphasizes this idea of going with the flow rather than trying to swim upstream against it.
But how can you not strive, especially if you're trying to accomplish something difficult? Wouldn't that mean just giving up?
Well, that's where the paradox of Wu Wei comes in. Our sources suggest that letting go of the need to control outcomes can actually lead to better results.
Really?
One even mentions an athlete who broke a Guinness World Record by cultivating this non-striving mindset.
Wait, really? So they weren't even trying to break the record?
It's more about trusting the process they focused on, the moment-to-moment experience of the activity, rather than getting caught up in the outcome. And by surrendering to the flow, they tapped into a level of performance that wouldn't have been possible through sheer force of will.
Okay, now that's fascinating. So how do we actually cultivate this Wu Wei mindset? Is it something we can practice, or is it just something that happens by chance?
Well, one of the sources describes this really interesting exercise called the infinite water scooping task. It's designed to help people experience and understand non-striving.
Infinite water scooping.
Okay.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So imagine a container divided in half by a string.
Okay.
You have a small scoop, and your task is to constantly transfer water from one side to the other, lifting the scoop over the string each time.
Sounds simple enough. What's the catch?
The catch is that the water can flow freely beneath the string.
Oh.
So no matter how much effort you put in, the water level never changes. It's a futile task.
So it's like a metaphor for the futility of striving.
Exactly. The task forces you to confront this idea that sometimes letting go of the need to control outcomes is the only way to find peace.
But how does scooping water relate to achieving a flow state or practicing Wu Wei?
Think of it as a mental training exercise. It's not about the literal act of scooping water. It's about the mental shift that occurs when you realize the futility of striving for a specific outcome.
So it's like a Zen koan meant to challenge our assumptions about effort and reward.
Yeah, the study actually found that people who performed this task showed signs of a non-striving mindset in subsequent unrelated tasks.
Interesting.
They were less focused on achieving a specific outcome and more accepting of the process.
It's like that Zen saying, chop wood, carry water.
Yeah.
Finding a sense of presence and purpose in the simplest of actions without getting caught up in the desire for a particular result.
Yes, and what's really mind-blowing is that this ancient wisdom of Wu Wei is now being backed up by modern cognitive science.
Okay, now we're talking. I'm always fascinated by how ancient wisdom and modern science seem to be converging.
Yeah, cognitive science has this dual process theory, which basically says we have two systems of cognitive function.
Okay.
The hot system and the cold system.
Okay, break it down for me. What are these hot and cold systems?
So think of the hot system as your intuition, your gut instincts.
Okay.
It's fast, spontaneous, and largely unconscious. The cold system is your more deliberate analytical mind. It's what you use for conscious thought planning and decision making.
So hot is instinctual and cold is analytical.
Precisely. And when it comes to achieving peak performance, sometimes our cold system, that analytical mind, can actually get in the way.
So thinking too much can actually hinder us.
Exact. When we overthink, we can second guess ourselves, become self-conscious, and disrupt the natural flow of spontaneous action.
Right.
Wu Wei is about learning to quiet that analytical mind and let intuition take over, to trust our gut and allow things to unfold naturally.
This reminds me of that story from the Chuang Tzu, one of the foundational texts of Taoism. And have you heard the story of Cook Ting the butcher who could effortlessly dismantle an ox?
Oh yeah, that's a classic example of Wu Wei in action. Tell me more.
So Cook Ting was so skilled at his craft that he could break down an ox without even seeming to try. He moved with such grace and precision. It was like a dance. When asked about his secret, he said he learned to go along with the natural makeup of the ox,
Wow.
to sense its structure and move in harmony with it. He wasn't forcing anything, just allowing his actions to flow effortlessly.
Cook Ting's story perfectly illustrates this concept of intelligent spontaneity. It's about reaching a level of skill where your actions flow effortlessly from your intuition. You're not consciously thinking about what you're doing. You're simply acting in perfect harmony with the situation.
Okay, I love that phrase, intelligent spontaneity.
Like, that's
Perfectly captures this idea of effortless action that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
But how do we actually cultivate this in our own lives?
That's the million-dollar caution, and it's something we'll dive deeper into in the next part of our deep dive. We'll look at some practical takeaways from these sources and how the principles of Wu Wei and Flow can be applied to everyday life beyond specific skills.
I can't wait. But before we move on, I want to leave our listeners with something to chew on. If striving can sometimes hinder us, how can you identify areas in your own life where letting go might actually lead to better results?
It's a question worth pondering. We'll pick this conversation back up in the next part of our deep dive. Picking up where we left off, how do we actually bring these ideas down to earth,
Right.
to see how they apply to our everyday lives?
Right.
One of the sources really emphasizes this idea of cultivating a non-striving mindset.
And to be clear, we're not saying to throw ambition out the window, and become couch potatoes.
Not at all.
Right.
It's more about shifting our approach to goals and achievements.
Okay.
It's about recognizing when to act and when to hold back.
Yeah.
Finding that balance between effort and allowing things to unfold naturally.
It's like that old saying, nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
That's Wu Wei in action. The source also talks about the importance of balancing work and rest. We live in a culture that glorifies the hustle, pushing ourselves to the limit.
Yeah.
But constantly being on can backfire.
It's like trying to force a square peg into a round hole.
Exactly.
Sometimes you need to step back, recharge, and let things settle before you can see the solution.
Exactly. Remember, achieving flow or tapping into Wu Wei isn't about brute force.
Right.
It's about working with the natural rhythms of our minds and bodies. Another key takeaway is learning to absorb and act rather than forcing an outcome.
So it's not about being passive, but about being receptive.
Yeah.
Like a martial artist deflecting a blow, you absorb the energy of the obstacle and use it to your advantage.
That's a great way to visualize it. It's like a dance between effort and allowing between action and non-action. And just like any dance, it takes practice to find that perfect rhythm.
This whole deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening, but I have to admit, I'm still kind of wrestling with this idea of non-striving. It goes against so much of what we're taught about success in our culture.
It's definitely a challenging concept to wrap our heads around, especially in a society that, prizes individual achievement and competition.
Yeah.
But what if we redefine success? What if true success wasn't about external validation or hitting some predetermined target, but about aligning ourselves with the natural flow of life and expressing our unique potential in a way that feels effortless and joyful?
That's a powerful shift in perspective. It's like we're not just trying to climb the ladder of success.
Yeah.
Right. We're creating our own unique dance with life.
And that dance can be a beautiful and fulfilling experience, even if it doesn't always follow a straight path now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive.
Okay.
I want to leave you with another question to ponder. If we accept that true success lies in this alignment with the natural flow of life,
right,
how do we identify and release those limiting beliefs that might be preventing us from achieving that harmony?
That's a great question, and one that I think will take us even deeper into the heart of this whole Wu Wei thing. Let's explore that further in the final part of our deep dive. Okay, so we're back, and I've been thinking about that question you left us with.
Oh, yeah.
How do we actually let go of these beliefs that are holding us back from really aligning with that flow of life?
You're right.
It seems like this whole conversation has been about letting go in one way or another.
You're absolutely right. It's been a recurring theme. Letting go of striving, letting go of control, even letting go of our ego. But, it's easier said than done.
Totally. What really stood out to me in the sources we looked at is this idea that a lot of our striving, it comes from this fear of failure or this deep need for validation from other people.
Yeah. Think about it. We're constantly bombarded with messages about what success should look like, the fancy job title, all the material things.
Yeah, all that stuff.
No wonder we end up constantly chasing something, never really feeling satisfied.
Right. And that chase can actually pull us further away from experiencing flow or even tapping into our potential.
Exactly. It creates this internal friction, this feeling that we're not enough unless we achieve X, Y, or Z.
So how do we break free from that cycle? One of the sources talked about the difference between virtue and virtue signaling.
Oh, that's a good one.
What did you make of that?
It's subtle, but really important when we're talking about Wu Wei.
Okay.
True virtue. It's not about getting recognized or applauded for our actions.
Right.
It's about acting from a place of genuineness, aligning our actions with our values.
Right.
Regardless of whether anyone's watching or giving us a pat on the back.
So it's like that idea, do good and forget about it.
Exactly. When we let go of the need to prove ourselves or get that external validation, we can act with so much more freedom and spontaneity. We're not driven by ego or fear anymore, but by something much deeper.
There was another source that linked this to the Taoist idea of day, which is often translated as virtue or power. But it's not power in the typical sense, right?
Not at all. It's not about dominating others or controlling things, but is about cultivating an inner strength and resilience that comes from aligning with that universal flow we keep talking about. It's recognizing that we're all connected and acting in a way that benefits not just ourselves, but everyone around us.
It's like we're tapping into a source of power that's already within us.
Exactly.
Instead of trying to force it from the outside.
Yeah, and when we cultivate this inner strength, we become less reactive to the ups and downs of life. We're not getting tossed around by every wave, but become more like the ocean itself, vast and unshakable.
That paints a very different picture of how we move through the world, doesn't it? Not about conquering or controlling, but about harmonizing and flowing.
Exactly. And it's in that harmony, that flow, where we find true fulfillment.
Right.
That's where our creativity, intuition, all those unique gifts can express themselves in a way that feels effortless and joyful.
It's like we're finally putting down the oars and letting the current carry us where we need to go.
Trusting the process, surrendering to the flow, embracing the unknown, that's the essence of Wu Wei.
Yeah.
And the path to unlocking our true potential.
Well, there you have it. A deep dive into Wu Wei and the art of flow, weaving together ancient wisdom and modern science.
I
hope this has sparked something in you, made you think about, where you might be able to loosen your grip a little. Trust the process and allow yourself to flow a bit more freely.
Until next time, may you find that harmony and ease in all that you do.